Hey everybody, it's John Kadlic from Parallel Path with the latest edition of Trail Talks. Today we're on an urban trail talk in downtown Columbus. I'm with my buddy Brett Kaufman from Kaufman Development and many other interests which we're going to get into today. But looking forward to having a conversation here in downtown Columbus on all things gravity and everything else that he's doing these days. So thanks for joining me, my friend. It's been a few attempts at this.
Yeah, no, it's
We
great.
finally pulled it off.
We pulled it off, and it's good to be walking and talking.
That's right.
Yeah.
Always good to be outside. I know you're a fan of nature, so.
I am.
Anyway, maybe you could orient those that are less familiar with you and your background around Kaufman and gravity and your many other interests, and that'll naturally lead to other conversations.
Yeah, you know, we were talking about this a little bit before, and really what I'm passionate about is trying to build community and build community in a way that really makes it easily accessible for people to have an impact in their life. And so we're doing that in a variety of ways. Gravity and Greenhouse are two brands that we've been building out in the physical sense. So those are mixed use communities, and each has got its own kind of niche and programmed in a way that has a lot to really offer to the people that work and live in them, hopefully in a way that really makes a difference in their life.
So I'm curious, like the origin story, I don't know you terrifically well, so I don't know how you got into like personal health and well-being from the jump. Has that been a lifelong thing? Has that been a later in life thing? Like, how did that come to be?
Yeah, you know, it's really been a lifelong thing for me. My earliest memories in the self-help world were entering into therapy when I was 8 years old. My parents were getting divorced, and my mom took us to a therapist, and I came out and said, you know, when can I go back? It's always been something that I've gravitated to, and really has been a giant consistent in my life. The modalities have changed, but I've always felt energized, inspired by doing the work, working on myself, and you know, now being able to share it with other people as my life's work is really you know, what I'm most passionate about and what I get the most joy out of.
At that time, that probably wasn't as commonplace, and thankfully the world's opened up to that being more normal, if you will, and accepted in a great way to be a full person. So you were probably a little bit unusual at that time, I would imagine. True?
Yeah, true. You know, I probably didn't know that at the time, but yeah, I don't think it was something that was talked about. I mean, I can remember even when I learned to meditate. Meditation's been one of the most consistent modalities that I've used, and I gave myself the gift of learning transcendental meditation when I graduated from college, and I hid it for many years. I would meditate in my car on breaks at work, and you know, it wasn't something that I openly talked about. Therapy, a lot of the you know, kind of self-help tools weren't things that people certainly were talking about in the world of business.
Right.
But yeah, there's been a big shift. It's a great change. I see a lot more people that are opening up and sharing what's working for them, what's not working for them, and yeah, it's certainly gotten a lot easier to you know, be a part of a community in that sense.
Thankfully. One of the things I've observed, and you're really good at sort of integrating physical spaces with a person's other aspects of their life. I don't know if that was also part of the intention behind Gravity and Greenhouse, but maybe talk for a minute about how you view that, because people traverse through the world in different ways, and you see it more in a comprehensive view, it seems like, compared to other places that might be just more focused on the transaction of acquiring a place to live.
Yeah, I mean, I started my business because I wanted to create a company that I wanted to be a part of, that I wanted to work at. You know, I had a lot of experience prior to starting my business, and realized that, you know, for most people, going to work was really just something that they did. It wasn't something that they loved to do. It wasn't something that they were dying to be a part of. And so I wanted to create a community within my company culture that allowed people to have access to the things that mattered to them outside, or what appeared to be outside of the work. And that extended into the communities that we built. We wanted to then be able to build communities where it wasn't just a place to work or to sleep, but it was a place to live and to then do the things that they loved about life. So we have been, from the very beginning, prior to having one employee, there was a statement that was written on a piece of paper about really trying to build things that mattered to people and that were more than just, what would appear on a pro forma or a piece of paper. And bring the things that people really had to go elsewhere typically to find. And when I say elsewhere, not just outside of where they worked and lived, but usually outside of Columbus.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I was longing for, we talked about nature, for
Yeah.
example, the greenhouse project, we try to bring nature into an urban environment. Not everybody's going to be able to go out west and to be able to sit in the forest or jungle and get that kind of feeling. So we've tried to simulate it within the community.
That's awesome. So maybe talk a little bit more about that. I was fascinated with Greenhouse and the GROW program that seems to be an integrated component of living there.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's personal to you too, and you kind of crafted that. And just talk to me a little bit about where that came from and what's involved.
Yeah, I think everything that we're doing is something that, my point of the last, question is that these are things that I wanted to have in my own life and that I know I'm not alone. And so they're things that have impacted me or that I know have impacted others. And now we're just trying to make them more accessible and share them with other people. So the GROW program is a perfect example of that. The greenhouse amenities are a perfect example of that. They're the basic things that people can do that can really start to collectively move them forward, make a shift. We talk about a month where we're focusing on our sleep. We've brought cold and hot therapy into the community, so you don't have to, run out and fill up a tub full of ice or pay somebody else. It's all part of there. Saunas, cold plunges, treatment rooms, so people again have the opportunity right where they live to have these modalities at their fingertips, included in their rent, included in the community, and they're doing it in a communal way. So they're not just working on themselves in isolation, they're working with themselves. The GROW program is intended to be a community program that people can opt into and collectively each month work together, hold each other accountable, learn from each other in a way that, I think makes a bigger impact.
I'm sure it does, and it probably attracts a certain cohort of people that are thinking about that in their lives, and that's extra important to them versus others. Do you notice, like from a customer standpoint, the kinds of people that are attracted to the companies you're building?
Well, yes, but I think it's also, for me, when I started to meditate, I was working at a bank. I was a guy that put on a suit and tie every day, wasn't really that familiar with any of this stuff. And I'm equally as hopeful that we're finding that person as the one that already knows about all these fun, cool tools and listening to Huberman or whatever they're doing. It's both, because I do believe that, no matter where you are in the journey, that sometimes you just need a little bit of a push to take that next step.
Yeah.
You need a little bit of awareness even just to take the step. So, we hope that we're attracting a wide range of people that are on that wellness journey.
So we come from the brand and marketing space, and you and I were talking a little bit before we pressed the record button about the fact that you built some very impressive brands, but you don't think about it necessarily in the traditional sense of building a brand. They're more derived from, again, your core beliefs or who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And yes, you create these curated brands, but it's almost, I was taking it almost like an accidental outcome. I know that's overstating it, versus like something that I'm going to build the world's greatest brands in the wellness space, for instance. Talk me through how you think about that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it comes from the inside and then comes out. It's who we are. It's who we have hired to build the organization, to build the brand. It's an idea. It's a belief system that comes with a lot of passion and a lot of experience, and then it just gets manifested in different ways. So the brand is a result of the core of who we are, what we believe in, and then it comes out in the form of a brand. We're not chasing trends, saying let's build a brand around that. We're building brands around belief systems, about things that we're passionate about, that things that we want to see exist in the world, and that's just always been my approach. I think it's more authentic that way. When I think back in my career early on, some of the things we were doing that weren't so widely adapted, and as they started becoming adapted more in the industry, some of my team would sometimes say, well, what are we going to do when everybody has a yoga studio or everybody's composting? I said, first of all, that'll be great because the world needs more of that. And second of all, we'll be on to the next thing because that's who we are.
Yeah.
We're bringing this from an authentic place, which is not what most brands really do.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to think about it because a lot of people almost go brand first. I mean, it's obviously coming from a place of beliefs, but they really, really think about the brand in a more concerted way. And it's just, you've kind of flipped it on its end a little bit. It's who we are. It's our DNA.
Yeah.
A lot of people say the experience is the brand. And in some ways, that's what happens. It sounds like in your world. So we could turn around here at this corner so we don't end up all the way in downtown Columbus on a cold day.
Sounds good.
And keep going this way.
Right.
So I'll pivot around you here.
Okay.
So you obviously have a lot of other interests. You're an excellent and seasoned podcaster now. You make choiceful investments in some health and wellness brands. So I'd like to go there for a minute.
Sure.
So, your podcast, again, we could talk about that probably all day long, but I love the conversations you have, and it looks like they're around the same kinds of things that you've personally experienced in your journey.
Yeah.
But you've been doing this now for a while. I'm just curious if there have been some common things in the stories that you've heard from people. I'm sure there's obviously uniqueness to everybody's story, but what have you learned from doing your podcast for the last series of years?
Yeah, the podcast, again, is one of those things, you used the word like accidental. What I was doing was having coffee with people and just having deep conversation, which is what I really love to do. I love to connect with people in a very deep way. I love to really understand what's going on in their life. How did they get to where they are? What could I learn from? What could I share? Where's their overlap? I believe that the human experience is a shared one, that we're really at the root all the same, deep down, and have many of the same challenges, many of the same experiences, and that together we improve. And so I just decided to start recording them and sharing them, really knowing nothing about podcasting. 5 years ago when we started, we've put out a couple hundred episodes. We're in the process of rebranding and relaunching the podcast. And I've learned really what I set out to do, which is that most of the stories are very similar. Usually people come at where they land from a place of either unconditional love or tremendous trauma. There's a lot of in between, but those are kind of the two through lines. And the main takeaway, which is really what I'm most passionate about, is that it all can be a part of a puzzle, a mosaic, that when you put each piece into place and use it to create from that place, and ultimately to create from a place of service to other people, that's where the real power is. Seeing your life as perfectly designed and being able to use it in service of other people has been the main takeaway that I've seen through the many people I've had the chance to sit down and talk to.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating that it starts in one of those two almost binary places.
Yeah.
Unconditional love or some sort of traumatic circumstance.
Yeah.
To create the person that is in front of you that you're talking to.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not that black and white, but like generally speaking, I find that people have one of those two early childhoods.
Yeah. Well, what about the investment side of what you do? You look like you've made some choices to place bets on some health and wellness brands. I'm curious, like what do you look for when you're making decisions like that?
Yeah, in both cases, the podcast and the investments, what I decided a long time ago, and really as I get to, what I'm calling the second half of life, I've realized that it's a lot more powerful to really not necessarily continue to be the one that's the creator or that is doing all the heavy lifting and is grinding and trying to acquire or assemble or achieve. Really what I want to be able to do at this point is share what I've learned and be able to do that with other people that are earlier on in life or that still have that fire, that hunger, that energy, that desire to create. And so in both cases, I think that the ability to multiply the impact, which is ultimately what I'm after, is trying to make an impact in other people's lives, trying to make a difference in the world. It's a lot more powerful for me at this stage to do that by investing in other people, by sharing my knowledge and wisdom with other people, by sharing our financial resources with other people, and to share somebody else's story, which people can learn from, through the podcast, to a much larger audience than having to, build buildings in order to be able to make that impact.
Yeah.
It's obviously a very labor and risk and financial and a lot of other things intensive business, the real estate business. So the idea that you can really multiply that impact by turning on a camera and taking a walk with somebody is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you said a couple things that you do as sort of regular practices for yourself. So I'm going to ask you a tougher question because you do so many things.
Yeah.
Like, is there one sort of non-negotiable or one just absolute thing you have to do or you seek out for your own personal health and wellness?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one, like I said, meditation's really probably been the most consistent. But what I really feel, I would lump into one is kind of my morning and evening routines. I really have stacked a number of habits in the morning, which have turned out to be a non-negotiable. And that includes my meditation practice, it includes a gratitude practice, a journaling practice, a review of my worldview. There's a few things that I just wake up every morning and do before I check my email, before I look at social media or do anything else. And that has become collectively the real non-negotiable. Same thing at the end of the day. I've loved getting into sauna and cold plunge and exercise. I play a lot of tennis like we talked about. And physical exercise and being in nature when I can. It's a little harder in Columbus, but I like to be physically active. That one has become more and more important for me too. But it's really kind of the collective. Some of those, I have my days where I can't get to, but I really try to hit that morning and evening routine every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you're terrific to spend time with me. I know we were saying we've given this a few attempts, and it's nice to finally pull it off, and maybe I could convince you to do part 2 of this in Colorado with me sometime.
Oh, I'd love that.
In
that
the
would
great
be
outdoors
awesome.
of Boulderado.
And you got to come on the podcast once we get relaunched.
I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it. What you're doing is really special, and the fact that you're trying to not only take your own learnings and just keep them to yourself, but you're getting them out in the world and helping others, either on an individual level or a communal level. I like some of your statements that you talk about for the individual, for the community. So. It's very generous of you. So.
Well, listen, a mentor of mine once told me that when one teaches to learn, and I feel like I'm more of a student than anything. I've learned a few things along the way, but that just never seems to stop. As Ted Lasso says, I'm a work in progress. So, be careful who you're listening to, what advice you get, especially for me. I'm kind of learning and making it up as I go, but it's a joy, it's fun, I love it. And anytime I can do or say something that makes a difference in my life and someone else's life, that's I believe why I'm here. So
that's awesome.
Anyway, thanks for having me.
It was really good to see you and spend time together.
Yeah, take a walk together and do this. I love what you're doing. I think it's really great.
Yeah,
I love these sort of short, digestible ways for people to get a little insight. It's really it's great.
It's been a fun little project for us too. So
yeah, cool.
Well, that's it, everybody, for this edition of Trail Talks. We'll see you out on the trail somewhere else sometime soon. Take care.